Hello collectors and welcome to my review of NECA's Otachi Land version. This is the first Pacific Rim action figure in the 7-inch scale from NECA to break the $50 mark, and given the reputation of some of the figures NECA has released in the Pacific Rim line, many have been worried about how she'll turn out. Is she a masterpiece, or did she come with a self-destruct feature? Well, let's take a look and see whether or not she's worth adding into your collection. Surprisingly, you may find that your Otachi turned out pretty well. Generally, the paint is clean enough for a NECA figure. And there are no general paint issues on mine, such as blobby paint or paint where it shouldn't be. Do take note though, I have seen some with iffy paint jobs, and apparently I got the fuzzy or hairy variant. Starting with her head, you can see the eyes are nicely done, and the yellow spots on the horn, or whatever you would prefer to call these, look great. The blue around the jaw is a little rough, but for dry brushing, it looks good. Now, opening up Otachi's mouth, as you can see here, the paint is rather basic, but it gets the job done. Of note for mine, though, you might be able to pick it up on camera because it's just very fine. Aside from the paint being very shiny, it's a little fuzzy. Apparently I got a special variant, because it's like carpet fuzz. Not sure how it got there, not sure why, but this is unfortunately NECA's quality control at its finest. Now, this thing here, not an egg sac like some dingus would say, but the acid sac is painted well enough with no slop. You can see that all of the blue little bubbles here are great, and there are a few dimples here and there from the plastic, but it's not something to really complain about because it does add a level of texture that you wouldn't normally get in an action figure. Now, moving down from there, we have the slash marks on Otachi's torso from Crimson Typhoon, which look really nice, and then you have the general markings that Otachi would have normally without the slash marks from the attack from Crimson Typhoon. And everything is nice and crisp, there's no real complaints, and the paint is nice and shiny, so it actually looks like blood. The arms look great, with blue dry brushing for the wing membranes, and the wings are all folded up. Moving down from there, though, we have the hands of Otachi, and the nails feature that gloss black paint, which some like, some don't care about, but if that's something that's been bothering you with the kaiju so far, I've seen some complaints here and there, then this may bother you too. The back of Otachi here features these blue spots which are very bright in color, but the blending isn't necessarily the best. If you're looking up close at it, you can definitely see that there's some white paint which isn't mixed in too well. Now, if you're a perfectionist, chances are this is really going to bother you. But if you're just the general collector, say, like me, then this really isn't something to really push you away from Otachi. And this trend is also carried on to the tail, as you can see here. And this is a better example of what I'm talking about the paint not being completely blended in well enough. You can see there are random spots of white here and there. Specifically right up here. You can definitely tell that it looks like they were going to go all the way, but it didn't end up happening. And speaking of the tail, one thing I really have to congratulate NECA on for this particular figure would be quality control. You know, because hairs on an action figure, that's exactly what I want to see. And finally, the top of the tail here, where the paint is about on par with the mouth. Not necessarily sloppy, but it's pretty basic. In short, Otachi features a nice green dry brushing, similar to Axe Head, with paint applications ranging from passing to getting the job done right. Add in a great sculpt, and this is one fine-looking girl you can take out on the town. Up next, for Otachi's articulation, it's actually pretty great. There are a few parts which, unfortunately, they're restricted, but in general, you're getting what you pay for. Alright, so first off, the jaw. This is pretty awesome. If you're familiar with Pacific Rim, and you should be, Otachi's jaw can separate. Like that. Now, the way that this operates is that there is a double axis or barbell style ball joint at both halves of the jaw. So this way, you can spread them apart, like so. And if you want to, you can put them together, and you can move them to open and close them. Like so. That's pretty cool. Now, the head is attached into the neck on a ball joint right here, just above the acid sac. So you can spin the head around just like that. A little restricted, but not too big of a deal because the actual neck is attached to the body on a ball joint. So you're going to be able to twist and turn Otachi's neck like so. Get her to look a little derp. Spin it around entirely if you really want to. How's that for a different perspective on things? Now, whoa, there we go. An actual look at the neck joint. Now, from there, we have Otachi's shoulders, which feel like they're also on the barbell-style ball joint, because you get fluid movement, not the swivel hinge type of movement, as you can see here. Pretty nice. Same joint for the elbows. You can spin those around. And then when it comes to the hands, they are also attached to the wrists on ball joints. So you're going to be able to move them around pretty great. Now, moving on from there, we have the midsection here for Otachi, which it is on a ball joint, and you're going to be able to get the ab crunch to move ever so slightly in both directions, but realistically speaking, the most you're going to get is swivel movement. As you can see here, full turn around. Well, you could if the Sculpt played with it, but still, it's nice to know that the option is there. So you get a lot of swiveling out of it, but not much of the true ball joint motion, so this way you can really get Otachi to turn completely around and look left and right, like so. Now moving on from there, we have the hind legs, which are attached to hip area on a ball joint, which is nice. We have the knees, which are a swivel hinge combo. Get the arm out of the way there, which you're familiar with on the Deluxe Kaiju. And then the ankles are also ball joints. So you're going to be able to get some nice movement out of there. And then finally we have Otachi's tail, which features, I believe it's 8 ball joints from the base all the way up to this portion right here. So you get pretty nice movement, but you can't get a full-on scorpion tail like you're familiar with in Pacific Rim. That's just about the extent to which it will launch forward. Launch in front of Otachi. But you get some nice side-to-side movement too. Like so. And then finally we have the tail tip here. And all 3 portions of it are on hinges. But what's really cool about this is if you move one, you move them all. There's a system of interlocking gears which allows you to move them. But they're all supposed to move, like I said, and you could definitely see that if I move this one, but for some reason, if I move the smaller ones, the top one doesn't really like to move. So that's the gimmick, that if you move one, they all move, but sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. So just be careful there, because I have heard of some people complaining that this system in here is just completely broken, so treat it with care. Now, something to take note of with Otachi here. She's made of a softer plastic. What does this mean? Well, she's very loose. Fresh out of the box, all the joints were nice and tight, but as you can see, over time, and I opened her up last night, yeah, the joints really started to loosen up. So, some may not find this to be an issue, which is, you know, pretty cool. That's understandable. For some, they'd rather have joints loose than they would have them tight, but do be careful when you go to display Otachi in complex poses because, well, you can see with the slightest tap here, I'm able to move her arms around. And then you'll have stuff pop off, and depending on who you are, that might be an even bigger issue. Surprisingly, Otachi comes with accessories. Truly, the first for a kaiju from NECA. First up, we get this acid spit accessory, which is nice, but the paint is a little, say, basic. It's nothing fancy, but still, it's an effect part, which is great. And swapping this into Otachi's mouth, it can be a little tricky, but you just gotta be patient and work with it. And the reason why it's tricky is you first have to take the currently attached tongue part in Otachi's mouth, wiggle it out, come on, there you go. And you'll notice that there's a giant gaping hole in Otachi's mouth. And then you have this plug, which you then just have to wiggle in. And there you go. So it can be a little difficult if you're just roughhousing it, but eventually over time you'll be able to get that acid spit in there just fine enough. Now, something to keep in mind is that this is also made out of soft plastic, not hard. So over time, as a matter of fact, it should be this way right out of the box, it will eventually start to fall down. And the blue acid spit will eventually need the little blue pill. And last but not least, we have this little teeny tiny baby Otachi with the umbilical cord. Not a tongue, an umbilical cord. So yeah, the detailing on this little thing, it's pretty great. You have all of these little blue spots running down the back. There's a nice grayish bluish spray on it, which is pretty cool. The eyes are actually properly aligned, specifically the pupils. Yeah, it's great. And this thing also features articulation. We have basic swivel at the shoulder here, on both. That's actually kind of weird, as an aside. You can see this blue paint here, which actually came off of Otachi's mouth. Anyway, swivel at the neck too. So if you want a super articulated baby Otachi, you've got it here. So all in all, Otachi's accessories, they're pretty great. Next up, we have a winged or battle-damaged version of Otachi coming, and there will be interchangeable parts, which should be great. So, in the grand scheme of things, with both Otachis taken into consideration, you have a lot of different display options here. But if you were to just get this Otachi by itself, you still get a nice package. In terms of sizing, as you should be able to guess, Otachi is pretty big. First up, here's Otachi with some Ultra Act figures. Next, here's Otachi alongside some of NECA's Godzilla figures. Here's Otachi alongside your standard 6-inch scale monster arts. Now, here's Otachi with some larger SH monster arts. Here's Otachi alongside some Jaegers. And finally, here's Otachi alongside some of the other Pacific Rim Kaiju figures NECA has made. So as you can see, though she is large, she absolutely fits in scale with the other Pacific Rim figures NECA has made. So, buy her now, skip her, or wait for a deal? Otachi looks pretty great, and in general is a step up from the cheaper figures NECA has released in the Pacific Rim line. By no means is she perfect, but she looks great, despite the little hair that I had. Articulation is fine enough, though do expect her to loosen up over time and to be a tad bit restricted. You will be able to get her into some interesting poses, but don't think the articulation is flawless. Accessories and compatibility are nothing to worry about with this figure, since we're going to get another Otachi which is going to have interswappable parts with this one, and you get the rather essentials with this release. Overall, she does feel a little overpriced, but she's not a bad figure. Hiccups here and there, sure, but I would say I haven't seen any real problems to turn anyone away from buying her. In my opinion, it was money rather well spent.